Hi, welcome back to our series, Do Fix Differently. I'm in a bit of a different location today. You might have noticed we're not in the cool office. England's in lockdown, and therefore I'm having to do this from home. But the good news is I'm not here on my own. I'm joined today by Oren Miller, who's the creator and maintainer of the Quick Fix engine. So we're very pleased to have him. He's not the sort of person that most people chat to on a day-to-day basis. So we're very, very pleased to chat to him today. Welcome to the episode, Oren.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. As you can see, I'm also not in a cool office. Also from home. But yeah, I appreciate you inviting me.
Great. So Quick Fix is obviously a cornerstone piece of software in the whole fix landscape. Could you tell us a little bit about the history, how you came to maintain this thing in the first place?
Yeah, so I got started in this industry around the dot-com boom. And at the time, there were sort of like these splintering of these ECNs. I think like Instinet was the first, Archipelago, Island, Brute. They were all sort of players in that space, trading sort of these listed equities. And there was some fragmentation there, and Fix was starting to be adopted by some of them. I know that Arca had adopted Fix. I believe Instinet as well. Island had their own Ouch specification that was competing, and I think some other people adopted it as well. But Fix became sort of like the standard pretty quickly in that space.
Right.
And I was working for Stafford Trading at the time, which was one of the big options firms here in Chicago. And it was basically in order to connect with Fix, you had to either build your own or you had to use one of the vendors that was available at the time. And even for us as a trading firm, which we had pretty significant budgets, the expense of a lot of the software was pretty egregious at the time. And so that's sort of when I had the idea to put something out there that others could use, just sort of as like a baseline, not really to compete with these products, but to have something that you could play around with and try out and could be adopted by some of the smaller players in the space.
Right. And actually the commercial driver is one of the things that we still see today, right? I talk to a lot of firms, and they complain perhaps about the software license costs of some of the commercial offerings. And they always want to move towards the open source one, typically because of the fact it's free. They tend to go more for the fact that it's free software as opposed to embracing perhaps the spirit of open source, which is contributing back to a community and things like that. At the time, this must have been pretty radical, right? Coming out with an open source engine, disrupting a commercial-based model. How did people react to that? How did the competition react, and how did the market as a whole react?
Yeah, it was. And although open source was pretty well adopted in general in software, I think by that point, but in the financial industry in particular, it was not. In fact, I think the only other piece of financial open source software I could think of at that time was QuantLib. There might have been a few others, but in general, financial companies, trading firms, they didn't adopt these sort of things, and it was actually looked on with a little bit of suspicion. Like, what's the motivation here? Why should we use this? Are we giving up some sort of competitive advantage by using this? And so it was definitely breaking ground in sort of like a very secretive industry where the idea that you share software with your competitors was very new for this industry at the time. So there was definitely some convincing to do that this made sense and it was actually beneficial for everybody to adopt something like this. And I think the fact that the Fix protocol has sort of its whole intention is to sort of bring these companies together, so the community together, sort of help in that cause. It was a really great sort of like entry in for the financial industry to share software with each other.
Right. And that sort of contribution back, the community aspect of it. Obviously, there's a lot of people today who are using Quick Fix in the variety of different flavors that it's now appearing in. Do you find that there is contribution back to the community, either on sort of a bug level or an enhancement level? Do you get a lot of sort of feedback for your perhaps product enhancement roadmap or anything like that?
Yeah, there is contribution, and it's this is actually a pretty contentious thing with open source lately. Is a lot of people thinking that there's not getting a lot of contributions back, and it is a little difficult sometimes. And to contribute to a piece of software that you're not intimately familiar with is difficult, to be fair. But there have been some a lot of minor contributions, some fairly major ones. For instance, quick fixes. QuickFix didn't initially support SSL internally. Support for SSL was entirely by an outside contributor. So it does happen, but you get a lot of contributions that you have to be diligent about it. You have to make sure that it's up to quality, it's up to standards, and so it's very difficult to sort of manage a project from a bunch of developers you don't know, doing all sorts of things that may or may not be up to the standards that you want to present for your project.
And presumably the things that they might be contributing may not actually be aligned to the vision that you might have of the product or the way that you necessarily might have written that piece of code, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And one of the purposes of QuickFix is to be just a baseline standard library, and so a lot of them want to make it more like some of the enterprise solutions, but that's not really our goal. We're not trying to compete with them, and we don't want to maintain sort of like that whole sort of enterprise solution that a lot of these other fixed engines provide. We're trying to be just like a standards, like you think like your standard JSON library, your standard XML library, that sort of thing. We just are trying to be a baseline protocol implementation.
Right. Now, so when you originally wrote this, the application, it was C++, right? And that's actually the kind of the core one that you're still maintaining to this day. As we were talking about this before, you said that there were wrappers then for Java and .NET and so on and so forth. And over time, those became their own version of QuickFix. There's a QuickFix J now and a QuickFix N for .NET, and there's a QuickFix Go version and stuff like that. How do you think that that's a positive step for the industry to have lots of different flavors of QuickFix? Do you wish that they were a little bit more cohesive? I mean, what do you think about the porting to different languages?
Yeah, I mean, like you noted, is the Java and .NET solutions used to be integrated with QuickFix C++, and that was done through wrappers. I think it is a positive. The reason being is that when you have a C++ project and you create wrappers for it, you sort of bring C++ baggage along with it. For instance, one problem is when you have this sort of native .NET portion of the library, it makes it much more difficult to distribute it on something like Maven, which is popular in the Java community for distributing packages. So first of all, having native implementations does a couple things. One, it gets rid of a lot of that baggage. The other is it allows you to make the libraries more idiomatic for the languages that they're targeting. Plus, you have maintainers that are, much more suitable for maintaining a Java or .NET project because they're more familiar with sort of what users in those languages expect from them. So they're more targeting the flavor of those languages. And it was a lot of overhead maintaining those wrappers. And sometimes it was getting to the point where maintaining those wrappers was more work than doing the core project itself. So it really distributes the load by sort of having several maintainers sort of in charge of their own domain, in charge of their own language and the users for those languages.
Right. Yeah. No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And in terms of support and the team who are kind of looking at these things, it's right to say that they're not completely isolated projects, right? There are common members across these various different ports. In particular, Connemara is one of the people who are looking at and supporting a variety of these different packages, as well as yourself, of course.
Yeah, that's right. So Connemara is a company I've worked closely with in the past. I go way back with the CEO, Jim Downs. He helped out, with during the early phases of QuickFix. He was around for that, and his company has taken up sort of the mantle of doing maintenance of several of the ports, as well as doing support for all the versions. So they do support for the C++ and Java version as well. Their company specializes in consulting for financial firms. So they can do integration and just also general level support for any version of QuickFix. They're intimately familiar with them. So that's I definitely think that they're sort of the glue that ties it all together.
Right.
And you also see, initially the ports were just porting whatever the C++ quick fix, sort of like following my lead. But later on, they started taking the lead. For instance, the first support for fix version 5.0, which was a big departure from the 4.x versions of fix, was initially done by the Java version. And I ported that over into C++. So you see, there's more opportunities for different people to take advantage of going like, we need to do this now, and then everybody else can follow the lead. It doesn't all have to come from me.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to highlight to viewers of this episode, is that there is actually commercial support available for quick fix engines if people wanted to do it. Connemara are doing support for various different quick fix engines. I believe MACD in Germany do the same thing for the Java version. So anybody who's considering an open source fix engine shouldn't think that they are completely on their own. There's certainly commercial support available if they really do want it. So that's an important point to draw out. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about one of my favorite topics, which is electronic documentation. And I always talk to people about various different formats. So the Fix Orchestra format, for example, that's come out from the Fix trading community. The one thing that I would say without any hesitation is that the de facto standard right now is the Quick Fix XML dictionary that I know you had a big hand in creating. It remains pretty much the only XML that people recognize and use on a day-to-day basis. So can you give a little bit of sort of a background as to why that XML exists? Where do you think it's going, if anywhere, in the future?
Yeah, it's something I needed. So one of the things that QuickFix does is it uses strong types in order to ensure that, when you add a field to a message, you're only adding a field that's allowed to be added in that specific place. Now, you can override that, of course, but we do basically allow the compiler to say, no, that's not supposed to go there. So in order to do that generation, I needed some sort of structured format of the spec. And at the time when Fix was originally released, I'm not sure about the exact version or what the first version of the spec exactly looked like. At least when I was getting involved in it, it was distributed as a Word document. It was, done by hand. The formatting was all over the place. So like my sort of hack around at the time was to use the Word export as HTML functionality, and then wrote a parser, I believe it was XSLT at the time, in order to generate that XML spec. And from there, I could then do the code generation and then, create documentation, use it to validate fixed messages, that sort of thing. So it had all sorts of uses once we had it created, but it was really just a need that I had originally. And I did have, the hope and the vision that it would eventually get adopted by more people, which turned out to be the case, but it was really just something I needed.
Right. And today, a lot of fix engines, even the ones outside of QuickFix, are using it, right? So I know that the Fix8 engine out of Australia uses it. I know that Chronicle use it, for example, as their configuration, their standard dictionary. It really does seem to be quite unique. And I recognize your problem with Word there. I felt it firsthand. In fact, one of the things I find myself doing on a regular basis is receiving in a Word document of a fix spec and trying to turn that into something machine readable. We have something coming out in the next couple of months on that particular point, but I don't want to give away my secret just yet. But it's certainly something that we think of. Do you think that the shift over time might be towards perhaps structures like the Fix Orchestra initiative from Fix Trading Community, or do you think that actually, for the purposes of a fixed engine, you don't need very much more than the QuickFix XML?
I don't know. So the QuickFix XML is, it doesn't have everything that you might need. I mean, it defines the messages, it defines the fields. One of the things that's not really structured, one of the things that I'm always having to digging through the documentation to figure out is what is the workflow of messages? When you send this message, you get this message back, or these other sorts of message back, and sort of like what are all the possibilities for the interactions for these messages? And that's something that, certainly the QuickFix spec does not capture. I don't know. I haven't looked yet too deeply into Fix Orchestra if it captures that stuff. But I feel like, that to me, that it feels to me like there's a need for that in order to understand how what sort of like the workflows are.
Yeah, so that is captured actually in the orchestra documentation. The other kind of innovation that might be relevant from a fixed engine perspective is they also have this syntax to allow you to describe conditional field requirements. So it's not just a Boolean yes no. It's required in this particular situation, right? Which I'm guessing would probably help you guys as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Generally, I mean, where do you think that the market for fixes is going? Do you think that it's dying? Are there new areas that are coming in? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, this is something that I keep expecting it to die. In the same way that I've kept expecting quick fix to eventually die a slow death. And it seems the less I pay attention to it, the faster it grows, unfortunately. But I've noticed it's had a resurgence, especially with the crypto boom, which looks a lot like the ECN boom did in the past. And so, cryptocurrencies and open source really go hand in hand, unlike back in the day with finance, where it was looked on with suspicion. It's looked on with expectation in the crypto industry. So for the past few years, I've seen more and more adoption, and especially sort of like targets the demographic that would be interested in using open source. So I've seen uses of QuickFix and a lot of the crypto exchanges using QuickFix or distributing the QuickFix spec documents. So it's I keep expecting it to go away because it is such a niche type of protocol. It doesn't fit into like sort of like the JSON, it's or some of the binary standards that happen. It's certainly got it's certainly faster than JSON, but slower than a lot of other possibilities. I don't see it being very well adopted in market data, but for order entry, it seems to still be very strong and growing. Again, these crypto exchanges are putting out fixed APIs. Now, I don't think the general population is adopting them. I think they're still using sort of like the web standards, but it is important to get sort of the institutional money into these exchanges. So I think for that reason, we're seeing a lot more adoption there.
Right, and I think from an IT strategy perspective, it probably is aligned with what the crypto exchanges themselves are interested in. Right, if their first product, their first API product is a web API, they're normally used to high volume transactions with not a lot of IT investment, let's call it that. So we go full circle back to your very original point about how much some of these commercial fix engines actually cost back in the day and still now. And the crypto exchanges typically don't want to pay that amount of money for something because their business model is fundamentally a volume-based model. They want to get the traffic in, right? And so open source alternatives for a fix engine in the crypto space is probably more likely than then going to some of the commercial vendors.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know that it's necessarily an issue with money. I think a lot of these crypto exchanges are super flush with money. I think a lot of it is more of an attitude of, they've sort of, this whole industry has been built off of open source. So I think they're just more open to the possibility. And again, QuickFix does not provide enterprise level solutions. So I could definitely see at some point when they scale up their fix offerings, maybe they will look into some of these other products. But I think QuickFix can take them a long way. I know, like, some of the exchanges are using variations of QuickFix. I believe Gemini, they put out a QuickFix spec, and I believe they're implemented with QuickFix. Bitfinex, I believe Connemara helped them get onto QuickFix Go. So it's definitely it's definitely something that they're more easy to adopt than some of the traditional exchanges, which frankly provide. Feel bad saying this, frankly, provide much better guarantees for uptime generally than the crypto exchanges, which are much more willing to go, move fast and break things and take a lot more risks, for better or for worse. So I think it's overall just a different attitude.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, it's been fascinating chatting to you. I'm sure we could carry on going for a long time, but we probably need to wrap it up. If there's one thing that you would ask from our viewers here about perhaps helping you in the QuickFix repository or world, what would it be?
Yeah. So we're currently, you can go to our landing page at quickfixengine.org. That's for the C++ project. There's separate pages for QuickFixJ, QuickFixGo, QuickFixNet. Just Google them. I don't have the addresses for them off the top of my head. But you can also go to our GitHub page. There's a link to it on our landing page, and you can just start the project and follow what's going on over there and just get involved.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. We probably need to wrap it up there. We'll put all of the links in the description for this particular video. If anybody out there is interested in learning anything else about Fix, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But for now, Oren, thank you very much for your time. Fascinating to chat to you. And hope to see everybody next time.
Thank you.